It happened yesterday. Indiana finally suffered their first loss, 1.5 on the Chalice rating. I don't really think this was overly entertaining for the rest of the country, but boy, for Ohio State fans, it was great. They got me. They got me. Who is they, Josh? Well, you know who it is. Most of you are here to watch me have to wallow in this, but you know me. If I whiff on one, I can't run from it. I mean, it's out there in front of God and everyone. Many people screenshot it, so I can't run from it. Here's how this game started. Colin, in fact, go ahead and throw up the tweet so we can just talk over it. So if you were watching the game yesterday, Ohio State goes 3 and out to start this game, okay? And then Indiana, 11 plays, 70 yards, and a touchdown. Ohio State's defensive line doesn't get a whole lot of pressure on the opening drive. They have multiple PIs called on them. And I go and do the one thing Meemaw told me never to do, and that is tweet during a game. And I did it. And I said the pucker meter must be rising quickly in Columbus. I think most of you understand what the pucker meter represents. And a lot of you came back at me like Brady there and said, man, it's the first quarter. Calm down. CYT. And I said, Brady, you think that defensive line and those corners are going to radically improve during quarters 2 through 4? Friends, 5 sacks, 8 tackles for loss. Indiana had 81 yards on 48 plays the rest of the game. This is bad early afternoon for me. Very bad. I would like to take this opportunity to apologize to Jim Knowles, to Ryan Day, to many Ohio State fans that I sparred with on the internet. I learned my lesson. I have to learn this lesson about once or twice per season. I'm not proud of it. I'm not happy about it, but it is what it is. In the interim, if that makes you feel bad, just know, could have been a whole lot worse. You know, as bad as Ohio State owned this game, 38-15, they had 2 more red zone trips with no points. So it was already a slight splattering. It could have been a full-blown splattering. It could have been a full-blown body bagging. Indiana had negative yardage on 4 different drives in this game. I told you 5 sacks, 8 tackles for loss. We said Tuesday, Ohio State should be able to turn this into a roster game. And that just means our guys are better than your guys, and it doesn't really matter what you do. As long as we aren't asleep at the wheel, we ought to beat you out of sheer superior athleticism. That's what they did. That's what they did. These sorts of games where you have an underdog, but one that looks perfect, their resume is unblemished, but they're going up against an elite roster, it's all about show me. It's a show me moment, and the show me moments in this sport are all about the freeze point, which I also described in great detail Tuesday. Indiana did not meet the freeze point. There is never a situation, as it turns out now that we've seen the game, where if Indiana played Ohio State, they would meet the freeze point. The freeze point is just the minimum required level you're capable of playing at to overcome the gulf of an advantage they have over you roster-wise. There's only been one team that's really moved the ball offensively against Ohio State this entire year. I mean, consistently moved it against them, and that's Oregon. Oregon's the only team on Ohio State's schedule so far that has met that freeze point, that has shown the ability that even when Ohio State's doing what they want to do, we can still do our stuff against them. We can still run our offense against them. We can run the ball. We can throw the ball. We can maintain balance. No one else has been able to do that. That's not surprising because Ohio State should absolutely be the best defense in the country, and if not the, then one of the very best in the country. It's just that sometimes you got to go prove it. And they emphatically proved it again yesterday. The consistency was there. Everyone who should show up showed up. And like I said, out of that first and last drive Indiana had in the middle of it, they did nothing all day. So they got me because I remember in the Oregon game for Ohio State, I remember thinking as I was standing on the field, wow, this defensive line's they're not taking over this game, actually the other way around. I was very disappointed in how ineffective Ohio State's defensive front was in that game of making their presence felt. And I also know that at times this year, folks have had success targeting Ohio State corners. So when Indiana was able to show both of those, advantage Indiana on the first drive, it fooled me. It fooled me. I don't know what else to tell you. I hate it, but it fooled me. So then I got painted as a negative, a nega Hoosier last week. I'm an Indiana hater. Why? Well, because I had the good sense to say they hadn't played anybody. And I had the good sense to say, given the playoff climate as recently as last week, I thought if Indiana lost convincingly, they should be out of the playoff. Now, a lot changed there. I'll get to that in a second. But Indiana was not fraudulent. I want to very, very clearly maintain what I said last week. Indiana wasn't fraudulent. In my own power ratings, I had Indiana number 10, which doesn't mean anything to a lot of you, but there is a big difference in sometimes a team being undefeated, but they'll be an underdog in games and stuff like that, and you'll say, wow, why does Vegas not think about this team, what the AP does or what the committee does? Well, whatever Vegas thinks is whatever they think, although they agreed. I thought very highly. Like, I thought Indiana's body of work very much matched the hype they were getting. I thought their ranking was deserved. My only pushback was the same kind of pushback that I've given to teams in various conferences over the years when it comes to the playoff. The playoff resume conversation, to me, is not always about just quality of team you have. If you have a noticeably inferior quality of schedule, I've been of the opinion in the past, I don't care if you're the Kansas City Chiefs playing college football. If you don't face the minimum baseline requirement of resistance on your schedule, you should not qualify for the playoff. You have not deserved a spot in it. That's not your fault. That's your schedule's fault. But I've held that stance before. I've made that argument for years. So my argument as recently as last week was, this is Indiana's shot. It's not their fault their schedule falls the way it does, but it's not my fault. And it's not Tennessee's fault, or it's not anyone else's fault. If Indiana doesn't get the job done here, hat tip to them, great season, they shouldn't be in. But then everything else fell the way it did. And so now you've removed benefit of doubt. I was willing to give other teams from other conferences benefit of doubt, but you screwed that up for yourself. So Curt Cignetti, in his postgame press conference yesterday, said, when asked whether they should still be in playoff consideration, he said, it's so clear. Well, he's right. He's right. Things have changed. The status quo has changed, as John Voight once said in National Treasure. Hello. He's right. So, ironically, Indiana lost convincingly, and yet here I am saying, if they don't lose again, they deserve to be in the playoff, because that's how crazy yesterday was. So I've never taken anything away from that team. Words will get twisted a lot. I was never taking anything away from that team. But I also wasn't giving them preferential treatment. I was going to judge them just the same, a resume-based judgment relative to the rest of the field. And if they didn't stack up, it didn't matter if they're a good, cute story. That doesn't matter. That's just emotion. You shouldn't even be judging teams. You shouldn't be judging which conference they're from. You ought to be judging a blind resume. Everyone else can insert the biases or the claims of bias, which I'll get to later. But Indiana is in now. You can lose me with the counter argument because there is not a conference in this country, including the SEC, that gets to blanketly throw out claims of their strength of schedule given what's happened over the last 24 to 48 hours and enjoy benefit of the doubt. Most years you would have it. This year you do not. So congratulations to Ohio State. Oh boy, they got Michigan this weekend. Jesse, did we get an early line on that? I mean, it's fat. I know it's over 3 touchdowns. Ohio State is favored to win the Big Ten, by the way. They're minus 145 favorite, and Oregon is plus 120 at FanDuel. I know Ohio State's over 3 touchdown favorite. They play that game in the shoe. I saw forecast high in the low 30s, so it'll be right in line weather-wise with what they've had in the past. 20.5. Okay, so not over 3 touchdowns. I think vengeance is coming Saturday. I know it's been a fun time at Michigan over the past few days because, first off, you guys covered emphatically for me yesterday, and I very much appreciate it. And you got your quarterback of the future, but he is not playing Saturday, and we'll predict that game later this week. Crazier things have happened. It is 2007 2.0 at this point, so crazier things have happened. I don't think it's going to happen in that game.